All right, so today we're diving deep into how to prepare for an immigration officer interview. And we're going to be using RoleCatcher's resources for this. We've got their career guide, their interview guide, and we'll even be looking at how we can use their AI to give us an extra edge.
Yeah, one thing that really stood out to me when I was looking at RoleCatcher's material was that they really emphasize this kind of holistic approach. It's not just about learning the right answers for the interview, but it's about really understanding the demands of the job and how you, as a candidate, fit into the bigger picture of what an immigration officer does.
Yeah, it's almost like you're preparing for a performance, not just memorizing lines for an audition. And speaking of performance, RoleCatcher's career guide actually does a really good job of painting this picture of what an immigration officer actually does on a daily basis. And it's way more dynamic and interesting than I initially thought.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's so much more than just checking passports. We're talking about surveillance, analyzing documents, conducting interviews, even inspecting cargo.
Hmm.
And the work environments are incredibly diverse. You could be at an airport, a seaport, border crossings. Talk about variety.
Definitely not your typical 9 to 5. And, on that note, RoleCatcher's guide mentions some pretty interesting advancement paths. Maybe specializing in a certain area of immigration law, climbing the ranks, even the possibility of working overseas. They also have a whole section on certifications that can really boost your credentials.
Yeah, I was really interested in the certifications section. They really highlight those certifications as something that can help you stand out from the crowd. We're talking about things like the certified immigration officer or the certified customs and border protection officer. These are things that can really show employers that you are committed and you have a deep understanding of the field.
Okay, so that's the big picture of the career. Now let's actually get into the interview itself.
RoleCatcher was nice enough to provide 10 sample questions. And these are seriously like gold. It's like having a sneak peek into the interviewer's playbook. So question number 1 is, what motivated you to become an immigration officer? This one seems simple enough on the surface, but what are they really getting at here?
I think with this question, they really want to see your passion. They want to know why you chose this specific career path, what makes you tick. I think a generic response like, oh, I just like helping people isn't going to cut it. You really need to connect your personal values to the larger purpose of the role. Maybe you've seen firsthand how immigration can impact people's lives. Or maybe you're really drawn to the challenge of upholding national security. Whatever it is you need to make it personal, make it meaningful.
So it's about showing them your why, but make sure that why aligns with their mission.
Exactly. And be prepared for follow-up questions, too. They might ask, what aspects of this job do you find most challenging, and how would you approach those challenges? Well, that's a good one. They're testing your self-awareness and your problem-solving skills all at the same time.
Exactly. It's important to be honest about the challenges. Maybe it's dealing with difficult people or high pressure situations, or even just staying up to date with those constantly changing regulations. But then you need to flip it and explain how you tackle those challenges head on. Are you good at de-escalating tense situations? Do you have a knack for research? Show them that you're not just aware of the challenges, but that you're ready and willing to overcome them.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so moving on to question number 2. How do you stay up to date with changes in immigration laws and policies? This one seems pretty straightforward at first glance, but I'm guessing there's more to it than just saying, I read the news.
Yeah, for sure. The interviewer wants to see that you are proactive and that you are committed to continuous learning. So how do you actually stay informed? Do you attend training sessions? Subscribe to industry publications? Maybe you follow relevant blogs. Be specific and show them that you have a system.
Yeah, so it's not just about keeping up, it's about staying ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And they might even follow up with something like, can you give me a specific example of a recent change in immigration policy that you found particularly interesting or challenging? They want to see that you're genuinely engaged, not just reciting memorized facts.
So always be ready with a concrete example.
Hmm.
Okay, let's move on to question number 3. How do you handle difficult or emotional situations with applicants? This one feels a bit trickier. We're talking about situations where somebody might be denied entry or their situation is just incredibly complex. How do you even begin to answer this?
Well, I think it's really important to start by acknowledging the human element in these situations. Immigration is an incredibly personal matter, and applicants might be feeling stressed, anxious, even grief-stricken. The interviewer wants to see that you understand that emotional weight.
So it's about balancing empathy with your duty to enforce the rules.
Exactly. Talk about your communication skills. Are you a good listener? Can you communicate clearly and with compassion? Can you connect people with resources to help them through these tough situations? Show them that you can be both firm and human.
Yeah, and I bet they're going to follow up with something like, can you describe a time when you had to deliver bad news to an applicant and how did you handle it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But it's designed to assess your communication skills and resilience. So choose a real-life example if you have one. But if you don't have any direct experience, you can still talk about how you would approach the situation. Highlight your commitment to clear communication, empathy, and helping people find the resources they need.
Okay, so deep breaths, everyone. We can handle this. On to question number 4. This one's all about fairness. How do you ensure that all applicants are treated fairly and without bias? It's a super important topic, especially today.
Absolutely. The interviewer wants to see that you are committed to equal treatment, no matter the applicant's background, beliefs, or circumstances. Don't just say, I treat everyone the same. Talk about your understanding of implicit bias, your commitment to diversity and inclusion, and your ability to remain objective. You might even have specific strategies you use to check your own biases.
Like seeking feedback from colleagues or staying up to date on best practices.
Exactly. Now be ready for a potential curveball here, they might ask. Can you describe a time when you had to challenge a colleague's decision or action that you felt was biased?
Whoa, okay. I can already feel the tension building. This is one that definitely requires careful navigation.
It is. But if you have a real-life example where you successfully handled a situation like this, by all means share it, but never fabricate a story if you don't have direct experience. Just talk about how you would approach the situation. Emphasize your commitment to open communication, respectful dialogue, and seeking guidance from superiors when necessary.
Yeah, it's about showing them that you're not afraid to have difficult conversations, especially when ethical standards are at stake. Okay, deep breath, and let's tackle question 5, which is all about handling uncertainty. How do you handle situations where there is conflicting information or evidence? I imagine this comes up all the time in immigration cases.
All the time. People might provide different accounts of events. Or there could be inconsistencies in documentation. So this is where your critical thinking skills really come into play. The interviewer wants to see that you can investigate thoroughly and weigh the evidence carefully.
So you're like a detective, not just a rule follower. You need to show them you can handle ambiguity and make those tough calls while staying accountable.
Precisely. And be ready for them to test those detective skills with a follow-up question. They might ask, can you describe a time when you had to make a decision based on incomplete or ambiguous information, and how did you justify your decision?
Okay, so I'm noticing a pattern here. Be specific and be prepared to back up your claims with real examples. This is where that interview prep really makes a difference.
It really does. Now let's switch gears a little bit to a classic behavioral question. Can you describe a time when you had to make a difficult decision related to an application? They want to see your judgment and integrity in action.
All right, so we need to choose our story wisely here. What kind of example would really resonate with the interviewers?
I think the best example would be a situation that really demonstrates your ability to weigh different factors. Consider all of the consequences of your decision and act in accordance with the law and your agency's policies. Maybe you had to deny an application even though you really felt for the applicant, or maybe you had to approve an application that presented some risks. It's all about showcasing your ability to make those tough calls while staying true to your ethical compass.
And I'm sure they'll follow that up with, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
Exactly. They want to see that you're willing to reflect and learn from your experiences. It's not about being perfect. It's about striving to improve.
That's such a great point. Okay, question number 7. How do you ensure that all applicants receive a high level of customer service? This one kind of feels like a curveball. It's easy to forget that immigration officers are also dealing with people who might be nervous, confused, even scared. So how do we balance that human element with the demands of the job?
Well, they want to see that you understand the importance of treating everyone with respect, empathy, and professionalism, no matter their situation. It's about being a human being, not just a robot enforcing rules.
Yeah, so we're talking about good communication skills, the ability to explain complex information clearly, and just a willingness to go that extra mile to help people understand their rights and their options. But what about situations where you have language barriers? How do you handle that?
That's a really good point. You can definitely mention your willingness to use interpreters or translation services or even visual aids to make sure that everybody understands what's happening.
And of course, I bet they'll have a follow-up question for that. Maybe something like, can you describe a time when you went above and beyond to help an applicant who is facing a difficult situation. This is our chance to really shine.
Absolutely. Pick an example that shows your empathy, your resourcefulness, and your genuine desire to help people.
Okay, on to question number 8. How do you handle situations where an applicant is not fluent in English? This has got to be a pretty common challenge in this line of work.
It's definitely a reality of the job, and they want to make sure that you're prepared to handle it effectively. While speaking another language is a fantastic asset, it's not necessarily a requirement. So you can mention your willingness to use interpreters, translation services, or even visual aids to bridge the communication gap. It's all about finding a way to connect, even when words fail.
And I'm sure they'll probably follow up with, can you describe a time when you had to communicate complex information to someone who didn't speak your language? And how did you make sure they understood? It's all about adaptability and resourcefulness.
Exactly. And remember, even simple things like speaking slowly, using clear and simple language, and breaking down complex information into smaller chunks can make a huge difference. Don't be afraid to get creative.
Yeah, it's almost like you're back in kindergarten, using pictures and actions to tell a story.
Exactly. And remember to check for understanding. Ask questions like, do you understand? Or can you repeat that back to me to make sure your message is getting across?
Great tips. And if all else fails, you can always call in for backup from a colleague or interpreter.
Absolutely. There's no shame in asking for help when you need it.
All right, time to tackle question number 9. And it's a bit of a doozy. How do you handle situations where an applicant is uncooperative or difficult to work with? This one's a real test of patience and professionalism.
Yeah, it really is. They're looking for someone who can stay calm, assertive, and professional, even in the face of challenging behavior. It's not about getting into a power struggle or losing your cool.
Definitely not. So how do you walk that fine line between being firm but also being empathetic?
I think the key is to try to understand what's driving the applicant's behavior. Are they confused, frustrated, scared? Once you have a better understanding of their perspective, you can tailor your communication and your approach accordingly.
And I'm sure they'll follow up with, can you describe a time when you had to deal with an angry or aggressive applicant, and how did you handle the situation?
Yep. So this is where those conflict resolution skills really come into play. Choose an example where you successfully navigated a challenging interaction and achieved a positive outcome. And if you don't have a personal experience to share, talk about how you would approach a situation like that. Emphasize your knowledge of conflict resolution techniques, your communication skills under pressure, and your commitment to finding peaceful solutions.
Okay, last question. Number 10. Can you describe a time when you had to make a policy change or recommendation? This one seems a little unexpected for an entry-level role.
Yeah, it does seem a bit out of left field, but I think the interviewer is trying to get a sense of your initiative, your ability to spot areas that could be improved, and your understanding of the bigger picture. It's not about having all the answers right away, but about showing that you're a critical thinker who's always trying to make things better.
So even if you don't have tons of experience, you can still stand out here. Like, let's say you noticed a bottleneck in the application process or a gap in the training materials. How would you approach that?
Well, first, you need to gather some data to back up your observations. Maybe you track the number of inquiries related to a certain issue, or you could even do a quick survey. Once you have some solid evidence, you can start to analyze it and pinpoint the root cause of the problem.
And then swoop in with a brilliant solution.
Exactly. Maybe you recommend tweaking a confusing form, creating a more user-friendly guide, or offering additional training to staff. It's all about showing that you can identify a problem, analyze it, and come up with a workable solution.
And I bet there's a follow-up question here too. How would you measure the success of your proposed policy change or recommendation?
Right. You need to have some clear metrics for success. Maybe you track the number of inquiries related to that revised form, or you measure applicant satisfaction with the new process. It's about demonstrating strategic thinking and a focus on making a real difference.
Okay, so before we move on, I want to circle back to RoleCatcher's AI tools for a second. We've talked about how they can help you tailor your interview answers, but they also have a pretty cool CV and resume builder. How can that help us stand out in a sea of applicants?
So their AI is seriously impressive. It can analyze job descriptions and then pick out those key skills and keywords that employers are looking for.
So it's like having a personal recruiter, scanning through hundreds of job postings and highlighting the most important details.
Exactly. And then it uses that information to help you build a CV or resume that's specifically targeted to the jobs you're applying for. It's not just about listing your skills and experience, but about showcasing them in a way that really speaks to the employer's needs and priorities.
That's incredible. And it can even analyze your existing resume and suggest improvements,
Yeah,
like having your own personal editor.
exactly.
Okay, so we've tackled some seriously tough interview questions, and we've got these awesome AI tools in our arsenal. Now, what about some of those career insights that we touched on earlier? RoleCatcher's Guide mentioned some pretty interesting stuff about functions and core abilities for immigration officers. Anything that jumps out at you?
Well, right off the bat, they emphasize active listening and speaking, which makes sense. You're constantly interacting with people from all walks of life, and often in pretty stressful situations.
Yeah, it's not just about enforcing the rules. It's about really hearing people,
Mm.
understanding their perspective.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just verbal communication. Critical thinking and reading comprehension are also super important. Immigration officers are constantly reviewing documents, analyzing information, and making judgments based on what they find.
I never thought about how much reading and analysis goes into this role.
It's a lot more than just showing up and checking passports.
And speaking of staying sharp, RoleCatcher also talks about continuous learning as a key skill. Immigration laws and policies are constantly evolving, so you always need to be ahead of the curve. They recommend reading updates regularly, attending conferences, workshops, even subscribing to professional publications.
Yeah, it's like being a lifelong student.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
But it's not just about legal knowledge, right? They also highlight the importance of cultural sensitivity and understanding.
Oh, absolutely. You're interacting with people from all over the world, each with their own unique backgrounds and experiences. So a good understanding of different cultures and customs is crucial.
It's all about building trust and showing respect, which can make a huge difference in those sometimes tense interactions. All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. How about we take a quick pause and come back to dive into some career paths and the overall job market?
Sounds good to me. We'll be back in a flash to explore what comes after you ace that interview. Welcome back. So we've just finished talking about some seriously tough interview questions. But now I want to talk about how you can showcase your skills and your knowledge in a way that really resonates with those interviewers.
Okay, I'm all about making a good impression. And RoleCatcher's Career Guide actually talks about this in a section called Functions and Core Abilities for Immigration Officers. What are some of the things they highlight?
Well, right away they emphasize active listening and speaking, which makes perfect sense when you think about it. As an immigration officer, you're constantly interacting with people from all different walks of life, and you're doing it in what are often very high-pressure situations.
So it's not just about reciting the rules and regulations. It's about really taking the time to hear people and to understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just verbal communication too. RoleCatcher also highlights critical thinking and reading comprehension as really essential skills.
I never really thought about how much reading and analysis would be involved in this kind of role.
Yeah, it's actually a lot more than you might think. Immigration officers are constantly reviewing documents. They have to assess information and make judgments based on sometimes incomplete or even conflicting evidence. So they need to be sharp, detail-oriented, and able to think on their feet.
Okay, so being quick on your feet, that's key.
Yeah.
What about the knowledge and learning section in the guide? What kind of advice did they give there?
So in that section, they really emphasize how important it is to stay up to date on all of the latest immigration laws and policies because they are constantly changing. So continuous learning is absolutely crucial. They suggest reading updates regularly, attending conferences, workshops, and subscribing to professional publications and newsletters.
Okay, so this isn't the kind of field where you learn it once and you're good to go. You have to be adaptable and always willing to learn new things.
Absolutely. And it's not just about legal knowledge either. RoleCatcher really highlights the importance of cultural sensitivity and understanding as well.
Right, because you're interacting with people from all over the world,
Yeah.
who each have their own cultural backgrounds and experiences.
Exactly. So having a good understanding of different cultures, customs, communication styles, that can be incredibly valuable. It's all about showing respect and building trust, which is so important in those sometimes tense interactions.
Okay, so we've talked about those core skills and abilities. Now let's talk about career advancement.
Huh.
RoleCatcher's Guide outlines several different paths that immigration officers can take. What are some of the key takeaways there?
Well, one thing they mention is that you can move up the ranks within your agency, taking on more responsibility, and eventually leadership roles. So even if you're starting out in an entry-level position, there's definitely room to grow.
That's encouraging. What about specialization? Can you choose to focus on a particular area of immigration law or enforcement?
Yeah, definitely. RoleCatcher doesn't really give specific examples, but they do suggest that you could specialize in things like visa processing,
Hmm.
border security, or investigations. And becoming an expert in a specific niche can make you even more valuable to your agency.
That's a good point. Now, this might sound crazy, but RoleCatcher even mentions the possibility of working overseas. Imagine being stationed at a U.S. embassy in Paris or Tokyo.
Oh, wow. That would be amazing. Think about all the opportunities to learn and experience new cultures.
Yeah, that would be incredible. Okay, so we've got room for growth, specialization, even international opportunities. That's pretty awesome. Now let's talk about certifications. RoleCatcher mentions a few that can really boost your resume. Which ones stand out to you?
So they highlight the Certified Immigration Officer, or CIO, and Certified Customs and Border Protection Officer, or CCBPO, as being especially valuable.
Those sound impressive. What do those certifications actually involve?
So they usually involve completing these specialized training programs and passing pretty rigorous exams to really prove that you have a deep understanding of immigration law and enforcement.
So it's a way to really set yourself apart from other candidates.
Exactly. And, those certifications can open doors to new opportunities and potentially even higher paying positions.
Okay, so we've talked about all the great career paths you can take
Yeah.
and the value of getting certified. Now let's be real for a second. The job market can be tough, especially for government jobs. What does RoleCatcher have to say about the outlook for immigration officer positions?
So they're pretty upfront about the fact that the job market is influenced by a lot of different factors, like the economy, immigration policies, and security concerns. It's a dynamic field,
Oh, yeah.
and things are always changing.
Yeah, so it can be hard to predict what the future holds. But what's the general outlook? Is there a demand for qualified immigration officers?
Well, according to RoleCatcher, the overall outlook is generally positive, and they expect demand to continue to grow in the coming years.
That's really good to hear. So even though it's a competitive field, there are opportunities out there for people who are prepared and persistent.
Absolutely. And this is actually where RoleCatcher's AI tools can really come in handy and help you stand out from the crowd.
Oh, right. We talked about how their AI can help you prepare for those tough interview questions. But what about their CV and resume builder? How does that work?
Okay, so their AI is pretty amazing. It can actually analyze job descriptions and identify the key skills and keywords that employers are looking for.
So it's like having your own personal recruiter, scanning through tons of job postings and highlighting all the important stuff for you.
Exactly. And then it uses that information to help you create a CV or resume that's tailored to the specific job you're applying for. So it's not just about listing your skills and experience, it's about presenting them in a way that directly addresses what the employer is looking for.
That's so smart. And I think you mentioned before that it can also analyze your existing resume.
Oh, yeah. It can analyze your existing resume and suggest improvements. It's like having your own personal editor.
That's incredible.
And that's not all. Their AI can even help you identify any skills gaps you might have, so you can address those through additional training or experience. So it's not just about helping you land that one job, it's about building a fulfilling career that's aligned with your skills and goals.
Yeah. RoleCatcher's AI tools sound seriously impressive. But it's important to remember that technology is just a tool. At the end of the day, it's your hard work and dedication that will make you successful.
I completely agree. Technology can definitely help you, but it can't replace your own drive and determination.
Right. Okay, so we've covered a ton of information about how to nail that interview and how to build a successful career as an immigration officer. But remember, RoleCatcher mentioned that the job market is also influenced by some external factors. What were those again?
So they specifically mentioned the economy, immigration policies,
Yeah.
and security concerns as major influences on the job market.
So even if you do everything right in the interview, those external factors can still play a role in your job search. It's something to be aware of.
Definitely. It's about being aware of the broader context of the work you'll be doing. Immigration is such a complex and often controversial issue, so it's really important to be informed and engaged with those larger conversations.
So how can we, as aspiring immigration officers, stay informed and engaged with these important issues?
Well, RoleCatcher suggests staying up to date on current events by following reputable news sources and engaging in thoughtful conversations with people who might have different viewpoints than your own.
Okay, so it's about being an informed and engaged citizen.
Exactly. And I think it's also crucial to remember the human element at the heart of all of this. Behind every immigration case is a real person with a real story.
That's such an important point. It's not just about enforcing the rules, it's about approaching each case with empathy and compassion.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive into preparing for an immigration officer interview.
Yeah, we've talked about everything from those really tough interview questions to how to use RoleCatcher's AI tools.
And we even touched on some of those broader career paths and advancement opportunities.
But one thing that RoleCatcher kept coming back to was how much the job market is influenced by these external factors.
Right. They specifically mentioned the economy, immigration policies, and security concerns as things that can really impact hiring trends and the overall demand for immigration officers.
Yeah, so even if you nail the interview and have a stellar resume,
Yeah.
those external factors can still play a role in your job search.
Absolutely. It's not just about acing the interview. It's also about being aware of the bigger picture and the context in which you'll be working.
So it's like you have to be prepared for the unexpected.
Yeah, exactly. And, immigration is such a complex and often controversial issue, so it's important to stay informed and to understand the different perspectives that people bring to the table.
Okay, so how can we as aspiring immigration officers stay informed and engage with these broader issues?
Well, RoleCatcher recommends following reputable news sources and engaging in thoughtful discussions with people who might have different viewpoints. It's all about being open-minded and really trying to understand the complexities of the situation.
So it's not just about being a skilled professional. It's about being an informed and engaged citizen as well.
Right. And I think it's also really crucial to remember the human element at the heart of all of this. Behind every single immigration case is a real person with a real story. And those stories deserve our respect and our attention.
That's such a powerful reminder. It's not just about enforcing rules and regulations. It's about recognizing that real people's lives are being affected by the decisions you make.
Absolutely.
Well, I think this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the world of immigration officer interview prep.
Me too.
We've covered so much ground. From dissecting those tricky interview questions, to exploring the different career paths and advancement opportunities, and even getting a glimpse into how RoleCatcher's AI tools can help you stand out from the crowd.
I think we've given everyone a lot to think about.
We have. And before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. How do you see the role of an immigration officer evolving in the future? And what kind of impact do you hope to make in this field? These are important questions to consider as you prepare for your interview and as you embark on this challenging and rewarding career path.
And remember, no matter what challenges you might face along the way, your dedication and your commitment to public service will always be invaluable assets.
Best of luck with your interview, everyone, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.